to make sure.
Hello and welcome into this week's edition of AFMC TV. I'm your host, Michelle Rupp. So are you familiar with the term adverse childhood experiences? Do you know what that means? Well, here today to talk about adverse childhood experiences, or ACEs, is AFMC's Dr. Chad Rodgers. Hi, Dr. Chad.
Hey, how are you doing?
I'm great. How are you today?
Doing great.
Good. Okay. Adverse childhood experiences. That is kind of becoming a buzzword.
Right.
We're hearing it a lot more in mainstream media.
Right.
So let's just level set and talk about what those are. What are we referring to when we hear that terminology?
Right. So ACEs are not like particularly anything new. Now the terminology has become, like you said, much more well known. Mm-hmm. It's something that as a pediatrician, I see every day. And then we've all seen the long-term consequences, and many of us have lived those consequences and lived through adverse childhood experiences. But we're beginning to talk more about the terms. And so when you think about adverse childhood experiences, you'll often hear people talk about trauma, but then people think about like a broken bone or a busted head. And this is it is physical trauma, because that can be traumatic to have a broken arm, obviously, because it hurts and you have to go to the hospital, that kind of stuff. But there's other sorts of trauma like child abuse and neglect, like you would sort of traditionally think. But there's also a lot of things that are very traumatic to children at very particular points in their life, especially when they're developing a lot and they're needing to form secure attachment with adults who provide that safe environment for them to grow and develop in. And there are things like parental mental illness, maybe, or who their caregiver is, parental drug use. Maybe they have been separated from a parent that they really care about because that parent has gone to prison, or maybe the parents have divorced and they just don't get to see their mother or father as much as they could, to create that kind of stable, nurturing environment that kids need to grow up in so that they grow up to be healthy adults. Mm-hmm. And we do know from long-term studies that not only does it have sort of impact on your mental health, but it definitely has impact on your physical health. So things like diabetes, cancer, drug use, all those things can many times be traced back to those experiences that you had during early childhood.
Could some of those experiences manifest itself in acting out in school or on the playground, or beating up other kids, or being a bully maybe on the playground? That's
something that we often see very immediately. That's what we see in our schools right now. We see it in our homes, and we see it, in the pediatric office. So a lot of times when kids are traumatized, they're what you might say, they're very activated. So we all have this instinct to survive, right? And so we've all had that, fight or flight. So we've all had that thing where we've been scared and our heart rate goes up and we get just sweaty and we kind of get out of our thinking brain and we react. And so when you see a child behaving badly, it's maybe because they're having a bad day or a bad week, or maybe they've had an entire just bad life, unfortunately, altogether. So they're kind of reacting in this survival mode, and there's nobody there to kind of help them regulate those emotions, bring them down, teach them behaviors that are more appropriate to respond to stress, and that they grow up, sort of as an adult, because we've all seen adults have temper tantrums too.
Yes, we have.
So you learn those things as adults so that you can control your own behavior and own thoughts and respond in sort of what we would think of a more typical way.
In addition to having something in the home life, a parent that's not around for whatever reason, there are other factors too that are environmental factors, such as food insecurities, I would think would be one of them.
So of course, we know that Arkansas has one of the highest rates of food insecurity. So people may not be without food all the time, but there's times during the month, particularly towards the end of the month, when, the paycheck hasn't come in, or whatever, your financial supports aren't there to provide the food that you need for you and your family. So food insecurity is one. Housing is a big issue, just having poor housing or even unhealthy housing. There's a lot of holes in the roofs around Arkansas, and a lot of holes in the floor. So they're not always, what we would consider habitable. And of course, then you have things like mold and cockroaches and stuff that make people ill. But there's many other factors, just having a parent that doesn't have a steady income. I mean, so you may be even homeless at times. So those things all kind of can be very traumatic to a child and to an adult. I mean, we lived through it too. Yeah.
So AFMC kind of answers that call a little bit with our ACEs Summit.
Right.
So talk about the summit, because it's coming up.
Yeah. And this is actually our 6th years here to do it, which is really amazing. So we really created this summit to be an opportunity to bring people who work together in many areas that are impacted by ACEs or where ACEs may occur even, and then things that we can all think to build what we call resilience. So, resilience is a really important factor for children to kind of counteract those adverse childhood experiences. So we have put together this conference kind of focusing we get a lot of questions from educators because of course they see it every day and they're on the front line and they have to deal with it. Healthcare providers, mental health providers, people who are, police officers, people who are in the judicial system, people who work with kids in the foster care system. So a lot of people at many points in our community that work to address these the impact of these experiences, but also to create better environment for kids. So we wanted to bring them all together, and it's sort of, this is not like a one I always say one pill, that's the doctor, to fix the problem. It's not a one shot fix. So it has many levels in order to address that. So it requires a lot of people be involved from a lot of different segments of our community to come together and talk about these things.
What are some of the things that attendees might learn?
Right. So we have pretty exciting lineup. We're doing really more of a series since we are staying virtual this year, just so that more people can attend and they can attend from their home or their office. So we have a speaker, Derek Clark, who's coming. He's a nationally known speaker who actually lived through quite a bit of trauma and kind of is one of these people who kind of rose above. But he really talks about a lot of, ways in which we can build resilience in our children's. And so his topic is thinking negatively and expecting positive results from kids. So we can't have negative thoughts about kids, thinking that kid's a bad kid and expect that kid to be a good kid. We have to instill that thought of goodness in them. And he's a really great speaker. He's also known as the Rapping Dad if you're on Facebook. Okay. So you can kind of go at it. So he's kind of a fun and interesting speaker. But we also have people from the judicial system, from the education system, people who work with foster families and work in the foster care system. So over that 5-week period, we'll have speakers on various topics around those. And we really wanted to focus on, now that we're coming out of the pandemic, where a lot of traditional social supports were lost, like school and food and housing, financial loss for a lot of families. Yeah. So what do we do now? We've kind of lost a year or two. We're playing catch up. And what do we do moving forward? Mm-hmm. So that's sort of our theme for this conference, is kind of moving forward and how do we sort of rebuild what we lost, regain what we've lost, and what we do for the future.
You make a good point as it relates to the pandemic, because there could be a situation where it's a stable family unit, but because mom and dad both lost their livelihood, then you might see food insecurities or a deterioration of housing, and that is so impactful on children. And so I would suspect there's a lot of valuable information. This
we think
time
it's
around.
going to be a really great conference.
Yeah. Is there a specific day and time, or is it kind of mixed throughout?
Right. It's a little bit mixed. Most of the meetings occur virtually at noon on Thursdays in the month of September. There's one evening that sort of allows for parents to attend since they, are busy working or they may have childcare issues. So that one is more in the evening. But if you go to the AFMC website, you can see when the schedule is and what the topics are. There were also, for attendees that can't protect, maybe they can't be there on September 8th at noon, they can go back later and watch the presentation. So as an attendee, you'll have access to those presentations.
And is there a charge to attend?
There is a small charge just to kind of help support the ACEs work and get the speakers there and all the things that go into organizing a conference. So it's a $35 fee to attend, and it's kind of a one price fits all. You can attend all of them. You might attend one or two. I think each one has that value to it. So if you just are only able to attend one, it's a good value and some good information.
That's great. And you get the replay in the event you have to miss. Right. So that's great. All right. Dr. Chad, anything else we need to know?
I think the main thing is just, think about your own self and sort of how these things impact you, and take good care of yourself so that you can take care of others around you. And so that's sort of the whole theme of building resilience in yourself, but also in others. So.
Good deal. All right. Dr. Chad, thank you so much.
All right. Thank you.
Joining us now is Ken Clark from Chenal Family Therapy. Hi, Ken. How are you today?
I'm great. It's so great to be here. Thanks for having me again. Great show.
Thank you. Thank you for coming back. Listen, we wanted to talk about getting back on that routine. You know, summer unofficially is over. It's winding down. Kids are going back to school. And oh my gosh, now we can't sleep till 9 a.m. We've got to be up at 6:30. How do we start getting back on that routine?
Yeah. So it's the struggle. It's not just this time of year, right? We all probably ride this roller coaster of finding our groove and good routines, and then something throws it off. A car breaks down, and we got to start catching rides with somebody else, and that throws off our routine. So this is one of the great human struggles, is to get back to the routines that work for us. So one, if you're struggling with it, you're normal. Two, the good news is solutions probably aren't as hard as we think, and don't require as much, kind of intestinal fortitude, as they say. Like, it doesn't require as much grit, just requires some deliberate action. So happy to give you some tips today on how to get back in those routines.
Definitely. What are some of those hacks?
Well, so the first thing is to know what routine you're going for and why, right? I think one of the things that we look at across the population, and we're bombarded with so many messages, whether it's from the magazines we read or the shows we watch, what everybody else's routines are. You know, we see on social media the person who's at the great workout at the gym at 5 a.m, and we're thinking, gosh, is that what I'm supposed to be doing? Is that what a routine is? In the end, our routines need to serve the outcomes that matter to us in life. So first and foremost, before you get back into your routine, design a new routine, figure out what that routine's supposed to do. What do you want from your life? Do you need to be more organized, more efficient? Do you need to stop running behind? Do you just need to have more quality time for you? Make sure that the routines you design honor the outcomes and goals and lifestyle that matters to you. So that's number one, is defining that, right? Number two, the biggest thing that we need to do is, I think, not design a better routine, but figure out what is getting in the way of that routine naturally happening and attempt to remove those barriers. I know I can speak for me personally. I'm a bit of a workaholic. I go all day long. So one of the bad routines I get into is Netflix at 10 o'clock at night. And when I get on Netflix at 10 o'clock at night to decompress, before I know it, it's 1:30 in the morning, and I binge watch something, and that begins to throw off everything else. So I think a lot of us would set about our lives saying, you know what, I need to get up at 6 a.m, et cetera, and not look at what keeps us from doing that. The reality is, if I just figure out how to skip Netflix at 10 o'clock at night, my body's probably going to wake me up at 6 a.m. So we strongly recommend that when people design their routines, the next step is to look at the biggest things that get in the way of that and attack those, instead of scolding yourself for not sticking to your routine better.
How do you create margin in your schedule as you are trying to put together a schedule or a routine?
Yeah. So margin doesn't create itself, and all the obligations and commitments and people we have in our life, that they will gobble up that margin really quick. The biggest thing that I do, and that works for all the people that we coach and we do therapy with, is to literally just allocate more time to the existing things on your calendar than they take. So for example, this interview today, I've got it blocked out for 2 hours. It never takes 2 hours. But that forces margin into the schedule. If I only book it for an hour, somebody's going to book that next hour. If you've got to run to the dentist or to your PCP office or whatever, and you think you can probably get in and out of there in 90 minutes, don't put it on your calendar for 90 minutes. Put it on your calendar for 2 hours. Force margin into your calendar by booking your things for longer than they take. Yes, it will feel like you have less time, but you'll finally have some downtime again. One of the things we recognize, Michelle, is that some of the natural margin that existed even 10 or 20 years ago has disappeared because things like downtime in the car are gone, right? In part with the pandemic, a lot of us stopped commuting, but now with our cell phones and podcasts and all these things, our brains are constantly inundated with information and connection, even when we should have some natural decompression time. So by building in extra margin, extra length into the times of the things we do, it helps. I would also highly recommend mini fasts, right? Mini abstinence periods from electronics, especially when you're in the car, especially when you're sitting on an airplane, we don't create a lot of room for our brains to just look around and wander. And turning off the electronics, as valuable as they are, is part of creating margin. Because if not, the little bit of margin we have is filled with news headlines and Facebook posts and all kinds of things that ramp us up.
And for as much as we need that margin, so oftentimes when we do go on like a Facebook fast or a social media fast, or we're flying and we leave it at home, it's uncomfortable now to sit with yourself.
Yeah, I mean, it's what that makes me think of is, the float tanks and the isolation rooms that are all the rage now. Like, people can't sit in those for 5 minutes without losing their minds, right? Like, all that silence. Quiet and downtime and being in nature and all these things are things that we've actually become uncomfortable with because they're so rare. We need them. Our brains need them. Our nervous system needs them. But the only way to get used to them again is to force it upon our schedule and acclimate. And you need to sit through that uncomfortableness until it passes. There's so much value on the other side.
Great advice. One more quick question for parents who have a new school year on the horizon. Any hacks to kind of ease school transitions?
Boy, it's all about sleep, in my opinion. There's so much data around how sleep impacts mental health, brain function, nervous system function. Clearly, we need a routine to get our kids out of bed in the morning. So I would highly recommend 2 weeks before school starts, not the Friday before school starts, but 2 weeks before school starts. We institute the bedtimes that we are going, and the wind down routines and the brush your teeth routines, all kind of stuff that we are going to have during the school year, as well as the wake up routines and the get ready routines and the put your room together routines. I think what a lot of us tend to do is we make the most of those last few weeks of summer. We stay up late, we pack vacations in, we travel, all that kind of stuff. And there's no way that your kids' bodies, brains, nervous systems acclimate to what they need to by the time school starts. So really work on building those routines in, even if you're on vacation, whatever, 2 weeks before school starts. And that will give their body plenty of time to acclimate. That includes diet, when you eat breakfast and what kind of dessert they get. Whatever those routines are going to be that help your child during the school year, they need to start 2 weeks at least before school kicks back into gear.
All right. Great advice as always, Ken. Thank you so much for joining us today.
I'll be here. Thanks for asking the right questions.
And thank you for joining us today. We'll see you back here next week for more AFMC TV.